Now, GIWUSA and 29 other organizations have made joint submissions to the Parliamentary Committee on Employment and Labour regarding what they call dangerous changes to labour laws. Matters of contention include a broad classification of unprotected labour action and no-fault dismissals veiled as retrenchments. GIWUSA President Mametlwe Sebei joins us for more. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, in your joint submission, you've noted that there are some positive changes for workers, but on the whole, the draft code is pro-employer. Talk to us about some of your biggest concerns.
Well, there are a number of provisions. One is that they want to make it easy for the employer to fire workers without a due process. So now, just to give an example, workers on probation will no longer be entitled to a disciplinary inquiry, let alone representation by the union. Secondly, that some employers are now exempted from even conducting inquiries, and what actually is being proposed is a dialogue and a conversation, which can be anything. Like your employer can simply call you to office, and say, well, I don't think I have a place for you. You have committed this or that. I don't want you anymore. Go. That will still qualify as a dialogue, if you think about it. And I think this is very important to highlight. Remember, many of the workers only get to understand the charges against them, the arguments behind those charges, as well as the evidence in support of those charges in the course of the disciplinary inquiry. That is the reason that whenever you go to CCMA, you realize that many of these workers is only there that they begin to adequately prepare and respond, because they would have learned about a lot of these things in the course of the DC itself. But there are also a number of things as well. These amendments want to expand instances of incapacity. So when you are injured at work, right, company basically can simply say, well, you're no longer productive, we'll throw you away. Just as the machine that ceased to work, they can do that. They also, want to now extend what they call incompatibility. So if an employer doesn't like you because you are a shop steward, you are trying to advocate for your rights and those of other workers to enforce compliance with the laws and so on, basically you can just say you are no longer actually compatible with the company because your challenges, values, whatever that means, right? So this is an attack on the rights that workers have won after decades of the struggle against an apartheid workplace and the tyranny of an authoritarian workplace management that was very much part of an apartheid regime.
So in removing some of the rigid procedural requirements for dismissal and giving employers more flexibility with dealing with dismissals, you've also said that membership constituencies of the labour movement were excluded from the process of NEDLAC negotiations together with the rest of the working class. Why do you believe that this was the case?
I mean, when the negotiations started, firstly, SABC, the second biggest trade union, was not even in NEDLAC. But also, there are many independent unions that are outside of the trade union movement. Never mind the fact that even ourselves collectively as an organized labor, we only represent a fraction of the workers. And these are the rights that accrue or to which every single worker is entitled. And our argument is that if government was government and business were really serious about the process of consultation, they would have done what is done in every legislative process, where you basically embark on a public consultation process. Now we are sitting here with a fundamental shift and attack on the rights of the workers, many of whom are not even aware about these changes, and they will just see them happening. But the other point that I think we need to make, this is part of the generalized attacks on the working class by this government, because what is the basis for it? You see, government now has a program they call Operation Vulindlela, where basically they are saying they are trying to remove the bottlenecks to the growth in the economy, which has been in stagnation for over a decade and a half now. Right? one of those bottlenecks, and insofar as public services is concerned, is actually a state monopoly, where they want to undo through privatization of Eskom, of Transnet, of Post Office. You mentioned all of them. Insofar as the labor market is concerned, they think the reason the capitalist class are not investing, to a point where at the moment we are sitting with non-financial corporations sitting on a cash of 1.4 trillion that is uninvested, is because of the so-called rigid labor laws. But that is absolute hogwash. The reality is, on the contrary, is a very attacks on the working class, the poverty of the black working class, that makes it impossible for any viable, profitable investment, because black working class cannot afford many basic manufactured products like laptops, TVs, microwaves, washing machines, all of that, especially those millions of working class people that are staying in informal settlements, but also many others in, poor paying jobs on minimum wages.
Yeah. What is your call to action? In fact, as you were talking about responding to that question and talking about some of the reasoning behind the exclusion, would you say that the exclusion was also a result of the labour movement's representation, which now stands at only 23%?
Yes, that's a point that we're making. That so one is that even when you take the organized labor movement itself, right? The fraction that was represented at NETLEC, the biggest union is COSATU, there was FEDUSA, there was NACTU, right? The second biggest federation being SABC, it was not even involved. But there are many big independent trade unions. You have AMCU, you have many others that are not even part of the process and the negotiations and are represented at NETLEC. But I'm saying, even if you take all of this, that is organized labor inside NETLEC and outside of it, is only a small fraction. You need to be able to inform every single worker whose rights are going to be impacted on this. Because the right to a due and a fair process of dismissal is not just a right to which only workers in unions are entitled and are interested in exercising. Even yourself, where you are working, surely you want to know if your employer has a problem with you, right? What is the basis of the charge against you? What is the evidence against you?
Yes,
so that you are able to answer yourself. Because the decision on dismissing somebody, especially in an economy where dismissal means you join a 12 million, long queue of the unemployed, is a life-changing decision that cannot be taken lightly without a say in a due process against those that it affects.
So what now? What is your call to action?
Well, we had, a mass workers' assembly today. Of SABC, its affiliate, and many other unions, as well as, worker organizations, community civics, and we've adopted a program of action. What is the program of action? We are saying this May Day, it is going to be a national day of action, but that will only be the beginning, really, of the process of rolling mass action. Preceding and in preparation of that, we are going to be conducting, a process of mass education to ensure that many workers at workplaces, in the trade unions, but also communities in civics, they are aware about these attacks, but also how these attacks are linked with the budget, the austerity budget that has been, passed, which entail cuts on social spending, on many essential public services, VAT increases, at the same time as they are refusing to increase and reverse reduction or cuts in corporate tax, corporate taxes, but also, it is related with the privatization of public services that is going to aggravate an existing and ongoing crisis of cost of living that affects all of us. Because when electricity is being privatized, we have already seen since 1996, electricity have increased by over 1,710 in tariffs water by 2,100%. And you are going to find many of these public services being beyond affordability. So we need a united front and a sustained mass campaign of the workers' movement. And we say mass education, mass mobilization, and a national day of action on May Day is, of course, the program of action that we have at this point in time. Beyond Monday, we'll review what has been the outcome of the day, and of course, decide on the next steps in terms of how to escalate our action.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, wrapping up that conversation with GIWUSA President Mametlwe Sebei, speaking about how a joint submission was made by GIWUSA and 29 other organizations regarding the employment and labor matter.